Welcome. This is a course on dynamics on ocean structures. This is a first module lecture which you are attending now. This is actually discussed by me. I am Srinivas Chandrasekhar, Department of Ocean Engineering, IIT Madras. This course is a virtual classroom course organized under the base of NPTEL IIT Madras. It is a web based course. You can listen to these lectures later at the end of the semester. So we will use Blackboard for explaining the concepts. Some of them are discussed in the PowerPoint here, which will be focused when it is required. So let us start up with the course. When we ask about question on dynamics of ocean structures, there are two components in this. One is fundamentals of dynamics itself as applied to any structural system. This is very important to understand. And two, what are those specialities in ocean structures which makes them different. So two components have got to be understood thoroughly in this course. Fundamentals of dynamics, of course, it is a graduate level course. Many of you have studied some introduction to dynamics at least in your undergraduate program. We will discuss some of the fundamentals back for the benefit of the listeners of the course. Many of you will not have understood the complexities involved in structural systems built for specific purpose like oil exploration, which we call as ocean structures. What are those complexities in mathematical modeling? How dynamics can be applied to them? Can we do them as easy as land based structures? So we will answer these two questions in the total course length, which will be covered in 3 modules. Lecture 1, which we will talk about today, is on different types of ocean structures. You may wonder that why we are not focusing on the syllabus outline for this course. As I said, you can log on to nptel.iitmac.in, go to ocean engineering subsector. The course on this title is available, the syllabus is already floated there. So it has got about 16 reference books and about 72 journal papers listed in the website. So I am not repeating it here because you can always access it later. So all these books are very important for us. We give due respect to all these authors who put their energy to write these textbooks. In that list of 16, I also have written a book on this. So it is not necessary that we follow my book, but some of the concepts what we explain here will be what you find in the book also. It will be easy for you to follow. The research papers are very important. They are recent updated papers. I want all of you to download these papers from our intranet system in the library, read them, follow them and ask questions then and there in the class as relevant to the topic of discussion. So today's topic of discussion will be different types of ocean structures. Now it is very important for me to understand what are the different types. I am not talking about different ocean structures itself, I am categorically dividing them into groups, I am classifying them. Am I going to classify based on the function, based on the geometric form, based on a dynamic characteristics? How it is done? It is very important for us to understand how do I classify them. So that is the focus of this lecture. The course outline will have an overview on different types of offshore structures and ocean structures which are deployed for oil and gas exploration, various environmental loads acting on the offshore structures, which is very important. You have got monitors on both sides. If you are sick, you can turn back and see there is a monitor at the back also. To discuss the structural action under environmental loads, it is very important for us to understand the fundamentals of structural dynamics, because without which we cannot do dynamic analysis of ocean structural systems. It is very important for us to know that. Detailed mathematical modeling of ocean structures, how are they modeled mathematically, dynamic analysis with some specific examples which we will solve here, which will show you the results. Fluid structure interactions, a very important vital component of the dynamic analysis of ocean structures. So I must understand this in detail. The stochastic dynamics of ocean structures, because the variables are time dependent. Can I do some stochastic introduction also in this? This is my outline for this course. We will also talk about the reliability application and fatigue reliability slightly at the fag end of this course as an introduction. As I said, the course will be planned in 3 modules. Each module is designed with enough tutorial at the end. So I want you to follow all of them and read the modules in the same order. Do not read the third one before you read 1 and 2. So it is important that the order of this module should be followed for you to better understand this course. Research papers are highlighted, they are not attached, but you can download them from the library facilities at IIT Madras. Read them, go through them, highlight them, then ask questions in the class. So is there any doubt in the overall structure of the course? So we are talking about 2 aspects in this course. One, ocean structural systems as such